Well, hello, welcome to this replay. If you're new to this channel, then get subscribed and hit the bell icon if you like memory palace trainings and you like memory improvement training and all that. We're going to talk about the reasons why you might want to stop and take a break and pause memory palace training on this particular live. And if it seems like nothing is getting said when you're watching the replay, it's because just waiting to see if anybody actually shows up. Trying a little bit of a different time actually, because a lot of people in Europe and different parts of the world don't necessarily get the opportunity to get on with the morning meetings, and that's one of the reasons for the delay. In any case, one of the reasons this topic comes up is because I had the flu quite badly recently, and so that's the number one reason why you might want to stop memory palace training, because if you're making yourself ill, then that's no good. Hello, if you're joining us on the live, let me know where you are in the world and what you're doing and what you're thinking. We are always best served on these if we have some interaction from you. But yeah, there's a time to train and there's a time to take a break, and there's actually benefits from taking a break from training. And one of those is that you just have time to consolidate in your mind the things that you've been able to learn during that time, and stretch out what you've gained and get some perspective from it, analyze everything that you've done and gained all that time. And it's really powerful to take breaks, actually. We know in the science that you do want to take breaks from time to time, and this is across the board learning any skill. And also, one of the things about taking breaks is that you don't have to spend long periods of time engaged in any particular learning skill, because that in itself can be retrogressive. You're not going to necessarily move as fast forward as you would like if you're just spending hours and hours and hours on a particular training regime, as opposed to maybe 15-minute blasts. So one of my most recent things was learning to juggle, and then learning to juggle while saying the alphabet backwards. So that was something where I really did 5-minute blasts of practice, and then took long breaks and just let it accumulate in these short little periods. The accretion of the skills that I was accumulating was much, much more profound and powerful because of that real focus on small, concentrated training periods as opposed to longer ones. And I know from speaking with Alex Mullen, who has 3 times won the World Memory Championships, that he tends to practice only for 15 minutes at a time. But yeah, the first major reason that you would want to take a break is if you get physically ill, which is what happened to me. And what ended up happening, which I thought was quite funny, is I did a podcast interview. I thought my flu was over, and it wasn't. And then for the first time actually ever, someone threw a memory challenge at me, where I was to demonstrate what it is that that I do. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have the flu so bad, quite feverish, and I'm gonna now somehow do this. Anyway, worked out fine. But it was pretty hilarious to have that additional stress, which is why I always teach you guys to be relaxed, be calm, be cool. Doesn't matter what happens if you make a mistake, no big deal. But there's saying that, and then there's doing that. And so it was a neat situation where I had to actually to feel that and do it, and it was quite cool. And I think it was a cool interview, so I look forward to posting when that is out. Now, the next reason why you might want to stop training, it's really kind of just common sense, but a lot of people won't do it, they won't understand to do it, is if you are finding that you're not actually training, right? So you'll have on your mind this weight of, oh, I want to be practicing, I want to be practicing, I want to be practicing, but you're never actually practicing. And so then it's just an unpleasant issue. It's not fun, it's not in any way rewarding, and so the point of actually doing it is lost, and then it just becomes a torturous issue. So it's not really just about memory palace training, but a lot of people, they're learning a language, but they're not really learning a language. They just have the debt of of this idea of learning a language and all the activities that go along with it, weighing on their shoulders day after day. You just need to cut that loose, let it go, and then you don't have that guilt. It's related to something called the Zeigarnik effect, where the more things you have on your to-do list, the more they impede, the more they impose themselves on your mind. And then they cause you strain, worry, anxiety, stress, lack of fulfillment in life, and all this unpleasantness. So, yeah, that's not so great. You want to get rid of that if you can. So, there's that. So, there's just general illness. There's not even ever showing up to the goals that you set for yourself. And the other reason why might want to take a break is when you need to go back and you need to actually study more, because sometimes people are training things that uh, they're not adequately informed about. Need more knowledge, and so what do? You go back to the books, you go back to the source. Had a really nice, interesting comment about how great Lynn Kelly's The Memory Code is, for example, and that's a great return to a source in order to fuel yourself up and get back to practicing your memory palace technique and your memory palace abilities and so forth. You just go and fuel yourself up, you get inspiration, you get insight into what others have done, and then you can come back and apply. So if you're on the live, hit that thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world if you have any questions. And that was really the 3 things that I wanted to say about when you should give a pause to memory techniques, because there's no point going about something when you're not actually using it, and it just gets retrogressive and it doesn't help at all. So that's pretty important. And again, just keep in mind the principle that taking breaks is actually useful. It's a useful and helpful thing to do in order to give yourself a little bit of space and to analyze things, analyze what happened. And especially if you're tracking your training, which everybody should do so that you actually can see on paper what results that you're getting over time, and you can create a progress curve. Then by taking a break, you can actually go and look at it. Now, of course, the issue that comes around this is how do you get yourself back on the horse when you've taken a break? Because that can be hard. You know, having had the flu, now I need to go back and get to the gym, and I went to the gym, and it was just not even knowing what to do, where to start. I know everything, what to do, where to start, and so forth. But you got to ease yourself back in, and really that's part of it. You just ease yourself back in. Do the smallest little task. EHM Armar says, I've tried to make and learn a memory palace, could not make one. Okay, well, thanks for saying hello. Thanks if you're joining us for hitting that thumbs up and leaving a comment. Tell me more about what you tried and what you think went wrong. And yeah, I haven't seen a memory palace drawing from you in my email, so I don't know what you may have been doing or not doing. But if you're just joining us, say hello in the chat, and questions, time for questions. Going into the email here a little bit, got one from speed reading or reading at a slow pace to ensure that we comprehend everything. Your answer and help will be highly appreciated. Waiting for the Grandmaster to reply. Talk soon. Thank you, Abhishek. Great questions, actually. If you're joining us live, let me know where you are in the world. Hit the thumbs up. And do these questions interest you? Do you like to hear them? Or would you rather not hear some questions and answers? I think they're really good questions, actually. So the first book is Do I Read Aloud Once and Then Keep Feeding All the Pictures into the Memory Palace? Well, I used to read aloud a lot when I couldn't concentrate, and it's really, really powerful, actually. It takes a bit more time, but it helps focus your mind on what it is that you're doing. Chandra says, hi Anthony, greetings from India. Hi Chandra, thanks for saying hello. Thank you all for saying hello and good questions. Coming up here, post yours in as well. And thanks for letting me know where you are in the world. That's always appreciated. But yeah, I used to read out loud purely not so much for memory, but for concentration. because during a particular period I could not focus at all. I couldn't read, and it was very difficult things that I was reading too, of course, with French philosophy and a lot of academic things, and that's also, you know, one of the more troubling things is when you can't focus and concentrate, but you know the knowledge that you want is so profound and you want it so profoundly, and your eyes just can't seem to lock on the page. So, yes, I did read out loud at that time. I rarely read out loud anymore, though, because I've been able to fix my focus and concentration problems through things like diet and sleep and memory training and meditation and concentration training and brain exercises. Just released a new video here on the channel with 4 new brain exercises that they may be new to you, that you might not have heard before. One in particular is really super powerful, and I saw in the comments on that video that Emerson's already trying it and that really loves it. So you probably have never heard that exercise before, so if you missed that video, go and watch it. It's the most recent video on brain exercises. It's really great. And since I've been doing all that stuff, I've never had to read out loud again, with the exception of when things are still super difficult, they're poorly written, or sometimes if I'm reading in another language, I'll read out loud to help slow down, essentially, because sometimes we want to go faster than we can, and we are perfectly capable of understanding what's on there, but we're just trying to read it too fast. So reading out loud can help speed things up. That's a good question, EHM. I will answer that in a second about daily brain exercise. But yeah, the general thing is that reading out loud still serves its purpose, but for me, mostly for other languages. Then the idea of reading out loud and helping feed pictures into the memory palace, it is a good thing, actually, in some cases, if you can verbalize what it is you're doing. Maybe you don't have to necessarily say station 1 and station 2 and so forth, but if you have some magnetic imagery that you're placing in a memory palace, if you vocalize what that magnetic imagery is, then you're processing it both through the muscles of your mouth, and you're hearing it in your own ears, which then gives it to you from different perspectives, which is then going to help give you an extra layer of memorization and give everything an extra punch in your memory palaces. So I would just say do that. I like how Abhishek here is using this phrase, feeding all the pictures into the memory palace. That's cool. I've never thought of it that way, and it's not necessarily the way I would do it, but it's a very cool phrase. What do you all here think about this? Feeding pictures into the memory palace. In some sense, that is what you're doing. You're certainly interacting with it in ways that really warrant calling it feeding in there. I think of it more as creating and magnetizing. Like literally, it's like sculpting, but it's also like directing a play. Because I use so many bridging figures that pre-exist, it's almost just like being a stage director and saying, okay, Anthony Hopkins, time for you to show up. You stand here, you do this with that person, and so forth. But when there's new, novel, strange magnetic imagery that needs to be created on the fly, then that, of course, it is very much like sculpting. I think of it more sculpting with magnetic material. So that's a good one. Alexander, I see your question here. I'll get to it in a second. But yeah, feeding, that's a great metaphor. Now, Abhishek is asking about sub-vocalizing when reading and so forth. These are concepts in speed reading. I don't teach speed reading. My friend Jonathan Levy does. I highly recommend you get his free trial that I've arranged for you all, which is at magneticmemorymethod.com/SL. And then you can learn more about suppressing sub-vocalization from him. One of the reasons I don't speed read is because I read perfectly well without doing that, and I enjoy the human language. I enjoy language so much that it just doesn't make sense to me. But one thing I have heard from serious speed readers, not the woo-woo mythical speed reading, but like legitimate speed reading, is that they do end up needing to take a lot more breaks. Speaking of our theme today, because it is quite tiring to do proper speed reading. So that's there. And then, of course, comprehension can be an issue. So there's the actual speed of reading, then there's the actual retention of reading, and then there's the comprehension of reading. And I find if I read too fast, I don't enjoy it, and I don't necessarily have any sort of understanding. But the biggest thing for me is the enjoyment, right? And there's nothing more painful to me than reading books that are written in poor language, or the writer's style doesn't match my reading preferences. So it doesn't necessarily even mean that they're a poor writer. It's just that our style isn't matching up, which is perfectly legit. That just happens. Doesn't mean they're a bad writer. But it is important to enjoy the reading, and the process of understanding is amplified and elevated when you like the author. And that's when I would do what I call bibliomancy, which is related to speed reading, but it's still very different. Um, and it's different in the sense that it is more geared towards rapid consumption of the key points of a book. It's not skimming. It's not speed reading. It's bibliomancy, and it is a different thing. So that's important. But in any case, if you want some speed reading training from the person I think is the best on the market for that, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/SL, and that'll get you a free trial, and I know you're going to love it. So just to finish up with this, when I memorize concepts, do I advise speed reading or reading at a slow pace to ensure that we comprehend everything? It's really just to do whatever gives you the most retention and comprehension. And one of the ways that I test comprehension is memorization of points. And so there are different ways that I read books depending on what the purpose of the books are. There's just general information reading, where I'm just reading to be generally informed. I just read a book called Do No Harm by Henry Marsh, I believe is the author. I didn't go out of my way to memorize the title or his name, but let's just see if general memory is doing good here. Do No Harm, Henry Marsh. Yeah, so that's what it's called. It's a really great book. I didn't read it for the express purpose of memorizing anything from it, just wanted to learn more about brain surgery generally, right? And I thought as I was reading it, well, there's a lot of terms about brain structures and so forth, and I thought if I ever want a little memory exercise, I want to learn some neuroanatomy and so forth and memorize all of these great terms, then this book is great because it's structured that most of the chapter titles have the name of some brain structure or tumor name or disease name and so forth, so that's all great. But I just read it generally. But when I want to read a book where I'm going to memorize things and it's like hardcore memorization, then I use index cards. And I make sure to have the page title of particular information numbered on the bottom right corner, and then those page numbers are indexed against magnetic stations in memory palaces. Those stations tend to have bridging figures based on a 00 to 99, so that there's always something to interact with, although they won't necessarily be used because there'll be bridging figures that are generally tend to be the author that walk through there. That's when it's got to be memorized. So that's a style. And then there are several other styles. It all just depends. If it's just general research for an article I'm reading and so forth, it depends. I suggest that you practice and have multiple approaches to reading different kinds of books as well, because there are different kinds of books in the world. So that was Abhishek's email. Let's go to some of the other emails that we have here in our chat. So EHM had asked about, do I do brain exercises daily? And yes, I do. I suppose that the odd time there's a day that goes by when I would skip something, but rarely. I doubt it. At bare minimum, I do the brain exercise of meditation. It's probably the best, which is why I don't ever want to skip it. There's a number of kinds of meditation. Let me know in the chat if you're interested. I got videos about different kinds of meditations that I use, so that is an option. If you are here, you're live, and you hit the thumbs up, let me know in the discussion if that's of interest to you. Specifics around that, we can go over some of them, but just meditation is the most powerful, and it's the one that gets done every day with almost without exception. I can't even think of a time when I've missed meditation in a long time. So Alexander says, Anthony, I would like to know if the magnetic memory masterclass is the only fusion of all the other courses, or if it offers something that isn't in the other courses you built. The magnetic memory method masterclass has material that is available nowhere else in the world, and it is the premium training. I think, I get a lot of email from people who've taken other things, and I just got one actually. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it because I get so many emails, but I'll see if I can, and it'll give you a sense of this. I'm not going to name the competitor that he names, but he says, Anthony, I wanted to thank you so much for the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. I'm a huge learner, high performance optimizer type of guy. Been big into business, etc. Ran across name of competitor and then yours. I'm a doctor as well, so I totally understand the challenges medical students are facing. And then he made a video, actually, 16-minute video, which is only going to be available inside of my training because it is training. It's so good. And he gave that to me to use, and I might make a little clip for YouTube, but it's so good. It's going to be just for the students. And he says, some of your philosophies and approaches to life were very evident in the course recordings, and they certainly align with mine. And then he continues. He said, I jumped on your training because name of competitor was superficial on the topic. Super glad I did because the real impetus is my newborn. I want to learn Gujarati to speak with her and pass on culture from her mom's side. And anyway, he says many things in this email, but it's true. The Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass is not superficial. It is very, very focused on filling the gaps that so many of the other things do not do. There are reasons why many of the other trainings are superficial. We can get into them. They're very interesting. They could, if you're not into certain topics, then they may not be interesting to you, but a lot of entrepreneurs don't believe in the human mind. They don't believe in the capabilities of their students, so they make pretty simplistic products because they fear that people will not take their training, and so if they challenge them too much, then they will run away from the training. And I don't do that because that's a problem. It's a problem when people are taking, I want you all to be the Flash, I want you to have speedy memory, speedy comprehension, focus, concentration, and you're going to need the real deal for that. You're going to need to know what a memory palace really should be. You need to see the higher level picture, you need to see the nitty gritty, you need to see the nuts and bolts, and you need to have dedicated ways of actually putting this into action for yourself. And superficial trainings don't cut that. So yes, the burden is on the student to actually take the training and to follow the steps and implement and create a sufficient number of memory palaces to even understand spatial memory. But for those who do, they just do so well. They do so incredibly well. And there's a reason why they do incredibly well, and it's all very, very clear to understand. And that is that if you want to get to these levels where you're able to just memorize stuff on the fly, or even just from books when you're reading, then you're going to need to put some practice in. You're going to need to understand what spatial memory really is. And you're going to need to understand what visual memory really is, and what auditory memory is, and what kinesthetic memory is. And those are not necessarily scientific terms of memory, but they're the modes of perception. You're going to need at least 7 of them working in combination at the same time. And there's a way for you to get there. There's a way for you to get there, and it's not that it's not a question of the only way to get there, but there's just faster ways of getting there, and those ways are fast if you show up to doing them. So it's very much like going to a training and then actually doing the training. So that's the deal with the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, and I'd just be delighted if you would hop in there and get the training, get trained up, and complete the exercises as described. Because the people who get the training and complete it as described, they get the results. And I do all that I can to make sure that they do. And when you come up with an issue, there's a special section there. Right now I call it the FAQ section, but I think I'm going to change it and call it the Dojo, right? Where people, they actually have legitimate questions because they're on the road. They're actually doing this stuff. And then their questions are really powerful and they actually can be answered in specific ways. Because general questions are answered in general ways, and specific questions are answered in specific ways. And that's just the way it works in life. And so if you're not on the path, then general questions will only give you general advice, but specific advice is something that actually comes from hitting actual issues, quote unquote. And the reality is there aren't that many issues that you're going to get into, but there are uniquenesses because each person is a little bit unique. And so there's an opportunity for you as someone in the masterclass to see what all these other people are coming up against and to see the recommendations and then to do some thinking and say, yeah, oh, and yeah. And you actually can do this, and then you don't even usually need to ask a question, but you can, and then you get some more insight, and then it makes everything else important. So dojo is probably a better word for that area because the students also become the teachers, and I learn from the students as well because it never fails to surprise me all of the amazing little things that happen, like the new email that I just read there, where he sent in a tutorial video for all of you based on something that he's doing, and it's just like, wow, this is incredible. And that's there for you because you're invested. But the sense that these things make are based on your engagement with actually doing what the videos say. So it's not data that you just save up and think, oh, well, that's interesting. You actually do something with it, and you do it with your mind. So getting back to the question about daily brain exercise, well, using memory palaces every day is probably one of the best brain exercises that there is, using your spatial memory, because it's going to let you use all these other levels of memory, combine it all together, and it's going to exercise your brain, and it's going to make you feel better. It's going to bring more creativity. It's going to bring more confidence. It's going to bring more consistency to the practice because of how you enjoy it so much more, and you have so much more fun with it, and you get more results, and your whole perspective of what your memory is changes, and it becomes more powerful as you become more powerful in relation to memory. And this is really, really important to understand. Tech experts here. Hello, tech expert. I don't believe we've seen you here before. Thanks for saying hello. And if you're not subscribed, hit that bell and get subscribed so we can meet you again. And let's look more in our chats. Make sure I covered everything so far. So Observer 249 says, yes, please, can you describe meditation? Okay, no problem. Alexander says, thank you for your answer. I will buy it in the next few days. Great. Look forward to seeing you in the masterclass. EHM says, I want to learn and collect as much information as I can, like the things around. I want to learn everything, how this stuff really works. Memory palace. Great, but don't get into hunter-gatherer syndrome. This is a problem that the internet has accelerated. It's deep in humanity. It's deep in our genetics to hunt and hunt and gather and gather and hunt and hunt and gather and never do anything with the information. Do something with this information, because if you're just hunting and gathering, then you're filling up all your bookmarks with links to pages, and it becomes data for later, which leads to the Zeigarnik effect that we were talking about earlier, or it can, and then it never gets anywhere. I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but I know a lot of people become super fascinated with memory techniques, which is great because memory techniques are fascinating. But what you've got to do is you've got to actually implement, because that's where you learn this. You learn by doing. You learn by doing, and then you learn by analyzing the results, and then you learn by assessing those results, and you do essentially a pattern. And you take a break once in a while, of course, as we talked about at the beginning of this live session. But there's a pattern of behavior that I call SIP. You sip at it, which means study, implement, practice. Study, implement, practice. Study, implement, practice. Again and again and again. And this is where you get the brain exercise, ongoing brain exercise and development of all these skills over time. Of course, you get them very quickly in the beginning, and there's a lot of quick victories, but you want to study, implement, and practice. So in your case, if you don't know how to build a memory palace, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. There's a course there, 4 videos, some worksheets that'll take you through the whole 9 yards of getting started, and getting started the right way. What I would argue is quote unquote the right way. It's a lot better than a lot of the superficial trainings out there. I can't go through all the nuts and bolts here. I don't have a piece of paper to draw a memory palace for you, but basically you're best served by going through that course. And then if you want the full masterclass, then that's there for you. And the masterclass will be even better for you if you take the free course. But it'll give you something to study and implement and practice right off the bat. It's really that simple. And in terms of things that you can work on, work first on understanding spatial memory. Every other memory technique can be used inside of a memory palace. It's not the other way around. I'm not going to say that memory palace is the be-all and the end-all for everybody, but it's really, really important to understand that. It is a foundational technique that you build up. A lot of people want to build from the roof down, and then their roof starts collapsing before they get there. E.H. Armour says, I took it, got the idea. I never saw a memory palace from you, so I don't know if you've actually created any the magnetic memory method way, but if I lost it in the email, I apologize for that. Send it again. But if you want to know how this stuff really works, as you posted in the chat, you got to do it. You've got to do it the way that's recommended. There's a reason that it's recommended that way. You're not really getting the benefits of spatial memory without it. I can't say that 100% sure for all people. Some people are really good conceptually. They can do a lot of mental rotation, but the ultimate mental rotation is when you get it out of your head and then you get it back into your head. So that's why I teach things the way that I do. Rahid, I hope I said that right, is here. It's been a long time since I watched a live of yours. Glad to be back. Glad that you're here also. Thanks for saying hello. And if you're joining us now and you haven't said hello, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. Let's get some light on. I wasn't expecting to go too long, but as I said at the beginning, I wanted to do one at a later time because I know a lot of people can't be when I do my morning sessions. It's just not right timing for them. Shrikant is here. Hello. Thanks for saying hello, Shrikant. Great to meet you. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Tech expert asks, can memory palaces be used while programming? I've never done it myself, but if we were going to say that learning a language was like programming your brain in the same way you could program a computer, then the answer is absolutely yes. I don't know enough about computer programming, but if I was, I don't know, okay, here's my programming experience. When I was in high school, we did Turbo Pascal for 2 years, and I don't have any distinct, profound memories of Turbo Pascal, but if I were going to learn something, maybe Python or something, and there was this code that kept coming up that I had to keep looking up, then I would absolutely memorize it in a memory palace so I could stop looking it up all the time. This obsessive looking up of information that you should have memorized by now is very, very easy to stop that pattern. You just got to learn some memory techniques, implement the memory techniques, and then practice them. And then whenever you catch yourself looking up information again and again and again repetitively, this addictive sickness of looking things up that you should memorize, then you have all the tools that you need to get it done. So yes, I even though I haven't done it myself, I would argue that you can. And actually, this isn't exactly computer programming, but I've been doing stuff with training myself to make my own thumbnails for YouTube. So they're a bit better, more clickable, as they say. And so copying and pasting hex codes is really, really annoying. So it's really cool. Yeah, I'm going to use this color like 5 times and just memorize it. And a memory palace is right there, available to help, along with the major method, which helps deal with memorizing numbers and combinations of numbers and letters. So Rachid says he's from Morocco. Awesome. I've never been there, but I want to. Alex from Nigeria. Just found out you got Aphantasia about a month ago. All right, have you seen, Alex, the post on magneticmemorymethod.com about Aphantasia? I'm going to release a new video this next coming week all about Aphantasia with some image streaming exercises that are said to help. people who are aphantasics, and that's going to help you, I think. But it'll be posted on that page later. But there's already a podcast all about aphantasia, and um, there's a video there already about it. And I don't think it should be a barrier for you at all. Shrikant asks, how do I improve my memory power? Well, the first thing is to define memory power. Let us know in the chat what memory power means for you. Make it meaningful, and then we can work on improving it. Because how one improves memory power is relative to the actual definition of memory power that we're using. What memory power means for me may not mean the same thing for you, so I would love to know what it is that you mean by memory power. So Tech Expert says, do memory palaces increase your logical and critical way of thinking apart from imaginative thinking? Well, yeah, I would say so. First of all, there's the logic of memory palace creation, which involves optimization of space and using logical decisions to reduce cognitive load. So that's really important. And critical way of thinking, I mean, this goes back to the question about what does memory power mean? Like, what do you mean by critical thinking in this sense? Logistics is more what I would say rather than logical, and critical way of thinking, I don't know. But if you were going to learn syllogisms and arguments and so forth, well, then you just memorize them, and then you use a memory palace to help you memorize them, and then yes, you're going to get better at logical and critical thinking. Incidentally, in case you all don't know this, back when I was a professor for 3 or 4 semesters, I taught critical thinking, and it's quite an interesting subject, actually. I like it a lot, and it's very, very powerful to invest time in actual understanding of critical thinking, and also knowing more about the kinds of fallacies that we make, and also knowing about just the weird things that the brain does to us, like cognitive dissonance and all of this stuff that goes on that people have. There's just so many problems in our thinking that you actually can debug. Going back to the brain power exercise, and I know there was a request to talk about meditation, one of the ways that we can debug our operating system is by doing particular kinds of meditation. So I've talked about it a lot lately, at the risk of being repetitive, which is what teachers are. So I always just laugh when people complain about me being repetitive. It's like, I'm a teacher. We know that people need to hear things repetitively to learn, so duh. But in any case, Kirtan Kriya is a great meditation brain power exercise, and it's very simple. You just sit in meditation pose. You can lie down, you can actually stand. I do this while walking, and you just touch your fingers like this while you're saying a particular phrase. Now, it doesn't have to be the traditional phrase, but I like to use it, and it's Satanama, Satanama, Satanama. And I do this for about 2 minutes, sort of like a song. Satanama, Satanama. There are actually notes that are published that you can sing if you like to follow some notes. And then you can also do it where one hand is going in the opposite direction, and you can do it whispering. Satanama. It can also just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and do that for a couple of minutes. Again, I do this while walking, I do it while sitting, I do it while lying down. It polishes the mind in a very, very interesting way. I think it's like defragging the brain. Very powerful memory exercise. And the cool thing about it is that it has an effect even if you're thinking about other things. Keeps you really centered, and you're more aware that you're thinking about other things. And so as a brain exercise, it's very powerful in helping you defrag, debug. Now, you can also do some tricks and some games with it, such as skipping parts of the chant. So instead of Satanama, Satanama, Sa-na-ta-ma, like that, this is the first time I'm like performing it, so I'm not sure if I hit it exactly in the right sequence. But if you do that kind of stuff, you're exercising your brain. Another great brain exercise is number skipping. So count to 1 to 10, and then try counting 1 to 10, suppressing the even numbers, and literally not thinking about them. But link this with your breath. So you breathe in on a 1, 1, and breathe out on a 1, 1, and then when you come to 2, now you're going to have the red cat phenomenon. Does anybody know the red cat phenomenon? Red cat is like when someone says, don't think of a red cat. In order to not think of a red cat, you tend to think about a red cat, right? So, well, how am I supposed to not think about number 2? Well, what's going to happen if you're anything like me is you're going to have the sensation of suppressing the thought of number 2, which it gives you something more tangible to play with than the idea of no mind, like meditating to clear your mind. You actually have a better experience there. It's a great brain exercise. And because of the satanama thing, and then because of the actual counting the odd numbers, like 3, you get relief. And that gets back to our theme of this chat, of this live stream, is taking a break. You get a break from your focused concentration. You've had this blast of concentration on suppressing information, and then you get to have relief by returning to the representation of information. This is all really powerful. The other thing too is if you're doing this and you're counting, for example, you could be counting and rehearsing your 00 to 99, right? So you could be thinking, okay, Thomas, Zaz, Sad, Sun, Sam, Samich, which is short for me, whatever. All my numbers from 00 to 99. This is a great brain exercise. Really wonderful memory exercise. You can do it. Anyone can do it. Okay, so let's see. Shrikant says, thank you for explaining how to improve memory power. You're welcome. It just starts with giving it a definition, and then we can work from there. YX Bob says, I'm a medical student. There's a bunch of stuff to be memorized. How many palaces can I use? Can it be useful to be remembered after years? Yes. I recommend each person have at least 26 memory palaces coded after the alphabet. If you haven't taken it, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Take the course. It'll help you create that many. That's just the basics. And it's very, very useful. Yes, you can use memory palaces so that you're able to memorize information years later. And I saw a guy on the street, his name was Lee. Hadn't seen him for months. And I'd only met him once. And it turns out his name was Lee. So it works. That would work the same for medical terminology, but you have a little bit more of a burden because medical terminology may not be as familiar to you as the name Lee. Rachid says, do you have any knowledge about anesthesia? I'm not sure about the spelling of anesthesia there. Do you mean synesthesia? And can it be developed using memory techniques? And if so, what technique should we use? Yeah, I don't know. I assume you mean synesthesia. I would say that you could develop something like synesthesia, but I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly how. I suppose one of the things to focus on would be to understand all the magnetic modes and make sure that when you're creating magnetic imagery, you're actually touching each of them. You will almost by default, but you might not be aware that you're doing each of them. And so because you're not aware of all those modes, then you might not be amplifying them. And so it may not be synchronous or linear synesthesia, but it would be as close to it as possible. So you would be hitting off as many of the different modalities that you have and go from there. Again, you want to put some time into figuring out what your senses are, what your modalities, what your strongest modalities are. I believe all of us have exactly the same. It's just a question of what are our preferred modalities, what do we tend to lean on, and what are we going to do to bring up, well, let's say focus first on strengthening your strengths and then bring balance to the things that you're not so strong on. It's not that they're weaknesses, it's just that you may not be as strong with those parts of the mind as others. So I think you can develop synesthesia as such, but I'd rather more focus on, instead of conceptual things like that, it's just like, are the memory techniques working, right? And if they're working, then they're probably working because you have used the fullest possible range of your sensory modalities, which I prefer to call the magnetic modes. So I hope that helps answer the question. In terms of what techniques you should use memory palaces for spatial memory and visual memory. There's some kinesthetic memory involved. There's also possibly auditory memory. Not enough people think about what memory palaces sound like. There's conceptual memory because you can think about the numbers involved in a memory palace. There's possibly olfactory and gustatory, depending if you want to use those things. And then there's the actual magnetic imagery inside, which also has all of those things. So those are the techniques one should use. If you're using the magnetic memory method, you're using linking by default. There's a whole bunch of terminology that just gets used by default out there. So it's episodic memory gets used, semantic memory gets used, procedural memory gets used. It's what makes it magnetic is if you're doing it correctly, or you're doing it in an optimal way. Correct is not the word that I mean, but by correct I mean you're optimizing each part. If you're doing all those things at once, then you're going to be using all the levels of memory that I know of that we have. There may be others. Science is great, adds new things, more understanding, or it consolidates what was already there. EHM says, my problem is that I can't learn the memory palace. May that be memory power. Well, I don't know why you can't learn the memory palace, but again, I haven't seen a drawing from you, so it begins right there, and maybe you want to take that course again. Ali's here. Hi, Ali. Thanks for saying hello. If you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world, and if you have questions, we're doing some Q&A. Tech expert says, do larger brains mean more intelligence and memory? Palaces like Einstein's brain and chess grandmasters. Your brain is also large and different, by the way. Did Einstein use memory palaces? My brain is large and different? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I've never seen my brain. I've seen scans of it, though. In any case, I don't know if Einstein used memory palaces. I was going to read a biography of his, but I chose instead The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bithell. I'm glad I made that choice. Einstein will still be around. I don't know if larger brains mean more intelligence, and I don't know that we necessarily want to attribute too much intelligence to chess grandmasters and so forth. Not that chess grandmasters are not intelligent, but think about life like this. Who cares? Like, they've got skill, they do all that sort of stuff, but who do you want to be, right? Who do you want to be? They already have them. So what attributes do you want to have? And what do you want to accomplish? And work on the best version of you. These games of comparison and, oh, Einstein, well, if he did that, maybe, don't get the wrong message. I'm not picking on this or whatever. But I see it again and again and again as people want to know about others when they're not spending any time on themselves. You're the only person who can do the things that you're going to be able to do if you just sit down and do it. And games of comparison and thinking about sizes of brains and so forth, none of that really matters. That's just a deviation from getting down and doing the work of becoming the person who you want to become and who you want to be now. So I don't really know the answer to the question. If I have a big brain, well, that's no excuse for any of my failings, and it's no excuse for any of my virtues. It's just the brain that I've got, and I'm doing what I want with it in order to achieve the things that I want. And I believe in phrenology. I don't see any good evidence for that. Maybe there is, though. I mean, there's a lot of arguments right now and a lot of heat going around if you are subscribed to Sam Harris and his podcast about IQ and all that sort of stuff. I'm not particularly interested in it. I'm interested in developing scientific factuality insofar as that's possible. I'm interested in helping people understand the difference between science and scientists and how that science is a tool that are used by humans. Humans are fallible, but the best thing about science is that science is a tool we can all use. Every single human being is a scientist, and all that means is that science is a way of making claims about the world and then validating those claims, verifying the veracity and the truth of those claims through testing. So if you think that you can use a memory palace, then you're a scientist who needs to make the test and go out and do the things that the teachers of memory palaces and the users of memory palaces are telling you to do. But you as the scientist. And then you see what the results are, and you say, oh wow, that worked. Why did it work? Well, it worked because I went out and took a course, followed the recommendations, then I had some stuff that I wanted to memorize that actually makes a difference to my life instead of just a shopping list like most of the books teach. Yawn, those books make me yawn. But like you actually memorize something worth getting into the head, and then your life was better, right? And that's what this is all about. Thank you, Tech Expert. I hope that helped, and I hope that you will see you again. But yeah, be a scientist. Understand what science really is, and be your own scientist. So, Alex asks, is it possible to create a memory palace if you have aphantasia? I don't have aphantasia, so I don't know. I hear a lot of people using aphantasia as an excuse to not be incredible in life. Just follow the recommendations. If you haven't taken the course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, please do so. And then create one, and you let me know if you can create one with aphantasia. I'm not convinced that aphantasia is a problem or even particularly exists in the way that is described, because people want to medicalize everything. They want to make a disease out of everything, and that's not very positive, because it's probably a superpower that you have. It's probably the most incredible thing in the world. It's just a matter of perspective and testing. So I hope you will, Alex, go and try to create a memory palace and let me know if it works. And if not, then maybe I can help you make it work, but I'm confident that it can. In any case, in most of my conversations with people about aphantasia, they use a lot of visual language. They use so much visual language, and I say, what's happening in your mind when you used all these words about, the snowy field and all that sort of stuff? And they're like, maybe I don't have aphantasia. Yeah, maybe not. Barath, how is mind map related to memory palace? For example, mind map of my coding project classes, etc. I haven't seen your mind maps of your coding project, but mind maps are essentially very similar to memory palaces in some particular ways. If you haven't seen my advanced mind mapping video, then I recommend you look that up, because I talk a lot about that. But just very briefly, anytime that you put information on a piece of paper, you are using space. Memory palaces use space. You can remember where things are placed in space. And if you don't cram it up with too much stuff, and you use, for example, a clock-like structure, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on. Obviously, you would do it in a bigger piece of paper than this, although maybe not obviously, right? Because why couldn't this be a mind map? But if you use spatial characteristics and then you actually associate memorable things, I'm thinking through the mind map that I made that's on that video, and there's things that just come to mind because of the images, right? So yes, they're related because they use space and they use spatial memory. EHM says, I'm a microbiologist, but I still want to learn memory palaces, and thank you, you've been a great help. You're very welcome, and I would love to see a memory palace that you've actually created. It's just the rule, right? Study, implement, practice. Study, implement, practice. Repeat, repeat, repeat. It's so easy. If you want a skill, study it, implement, and practice. There's maybe some other stuff there, right? There's like the DOC principle that I've shared with you before. I didn't write my 0 here very good, my O, but DOC. Doing is the origin of creativity. Doing is the origin of confidence. Doing is the origin of consistency. Doing is the origin of creativity and courage and control and competence, right? A lot of people want competence without earning it. They don't do anything. They just sit around thinking about doing stuff, which leads to the Zeigarnik effect, right? And then, starting with the theme today's talk about taking breaks and so forth, well, all they're doing is taking breaks, but they can't take break from their mind, which is punishing them because they're not doing anything. Shrikant says, please tell me some rules improving memory power, apply daily life. I'm still waiting for you to define memory power. We're not going to get any further without a definition of what memory power means. What does memory power mean? Do you mean memory skills? If so, which memory skills? What are you trying to improve? let's be specific. We cannot have any sort of general help. It doesn't do anything. Um, we need specifics. So while we're waiting for that, let's let's see if we got some interesting things in the mailbag. All right. Good afternoon. I'm reading through one of your books now. What's frustrating me with my memory is that I used to be able to remember anything, long strings of numbers, facts, some source code, and able to pass any test. Now I'm having trouble recalling anything I have read. Okay, well, that's a good discovery, good thing to know. Some things to think about are, first of all, an analysis of your past. What might have been different in the past? What were you doing perhaps differently? Did you have a different job? Did you have a different diet? Did you have a different sleep pattern? Did you have a different life partner? Did you live somewhere different? What are the things that might be going on that changed? And what did you do anything? Did you use memory techniques and now you're not anymore? Did you take notes in a particular way? Now you're not anymore. And just think about age as well. I mean, age is going to impact us all. And I'm certainly feeling it now. I think it's one of the most exciting things, actually, in this work that I do, because I can document, since I teach so regularly memory techniques, I can document my own experience. I felt a bit of a shift. I felt a little bit of a burden. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's there. And a lot of it is just psychological, to tell you the truth, so far. But that is interesting. We'll talk more about that. Harry Lorraine has a book for aged people. I don't know what the politically correct term is for aged people, but people who are elders. And it's quite good. And I am going to hang on to it to read again and again as I age, because he certainly is. I mean, I haven't seen a very recent video, but I've seen a pretty recent video of him doing magic tricks. He's pretty sharp. Oh man, is he ever sharp. Like, he's still entertaining too with his magic tricks. And I am a magician myself, so I know the burden of memory involved in a lot of those tricks, and he's still like whipping it out. It's unbelievable. So if you haven't, like, look up Harry Lorraine's most recent birthday on YouTube and you can watch him performing. Really, really amazing. So that's that. EAHM says, when will I be live next time? I don't announce the exact live times when I go on, and there's a number of reasons for that we've talked about before. So the best thing to do is make sure you click that bell icon on your subscribe on this channel. And I know that it's not the greatest thing in the world, but be generally attentive to when YouTube lets you know that I'm alive, and hop on, say hello, be active, be engaged, and be part of the conversation. Hit the thumbs up. If you're here and you haven't hit the thumbs up and you haven't said hello, let me know where you are in the world. These sessions are for you, and they're a general service for the public, and they're really meant to help you out. So just be here. Daniel's here. Hello, Daniel. Great to see you. I was hoping some different kind of people would show up when I did a different time on the internet, because normally I do the mornings, which I imagine in your region you're not around. Great to see you, Daniel. So EAHM says he'll be working on SIP and will show you your own mind palace. Okay, great. I tend not to, look, you can call it whatever you want, but I don't like the term mind palace. It's not about your mind, it's about your memory. Now, your memory is in your mind and it's part of your mind, but terms matter. Terms matter. We want to focus on memory palace. I don't know if Daniel agrees. I know Daniel uses memory techniques himself. But I believe when he translated it into Spanish, he also goes for the memory palace, not the mind palace. Oh, by the way, Daniel, my new cup. Who likes my new cup? I'm just curious. Let's take a break here from hard work. Daniel says, yeah, exactly. So the flash, I like the flash, you know? The flash is kind of a good metaphor for people who use memory techniques. Because, you know, he's always shows up on time when there's an emergency, right on time. But in his personal life, he can't be bothered to show up on dates or even for work on time and all that sort of stuff. And we've got to be like the flash across the board. We got to be ready across the board to use our memory techniques. Not half and half, like a superhero who's really not, you know? The Flash is an interesting character because he's not really a superhero, but he's the reluctant hero guy, I guess. Anyway, I like the Flash. Rahid says, do you have any techniques you use for remembering while speed reading without making me go slow? Rahid, you may have missed it, but earlier I talked about how I don't do speed reading. But if you want some speed reading training, Jonathan Levy's the man to go to. magneticmemorymethod.com/SL. You'll get a training there. He has his own take on being able to create mnemonics while you are reading without slowing yourself down. So definitely train up with the master. Rakit says, I love the cup, watched the Flash and loved it. Yeah, I liked season 1. I thought it was awesome. EHM says, I am the Flash. Rakit says, already got his course on Udemy. All right, well, I mean, if you're involved in his community, then people can probably help you there. But I would just say practice. I mean, it's the same thing, right? SIP, but I can't speak on speed reading. I can only speak on the way that I read, and the way that I read without slowing down and creating images is by slowing down and creating the images that I need, because I want to retain and comprehend the information. So I just don't try to have the cake and eat it too. I actually just have the book and I memorize what it is that I read there. So Pramesh had a comment that has disappeared. All right, hopefully it's coming back. Try. Here's the general thing, Rahid. There are the shortcuts are found along the way, not necessarily the long way or the short way, but along the way. So be on the path, and you will find the shortcuts that you need through study, implementation, and practice. And always ask the people who teach the things that you want to master. Pramesh says, hello Anthony, tell me a few important tips to memorize medical terms. Okay, no problem. First is a memory palace. Make sure you're very good at spatial memory and your memory palace. And then make sure that you're very good at creating magnetic imagery in your memory palaces. Then make sure that you're very good at recall rehearsal so that you get the information associated with the magnetic imagery into long-term memory. And make sure you have all the major tools of the major method so that you've supplemented your practice. You'll need numbers. So that's part of your magnetic imagery set. And then study, implement, practice. That's it. That's like the package right there. If you do all that, you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. If you have more questions that are specific to practice, let me know. But those are the important tips, the most important tips of all. Oh, and keep a memory journal. Memory journal is a really important part of the process and the practice. Without a memory journal, you're placing an unnecessary amount of burden on your memory. So you can relieve a lot and have a lot of space for your memory by doing that. So Pramesh says, I find it very difficult to associate new terms with the memory palace. Well, that's probably just a practice issue. Most people find that when they set aside some time to practice, they get better and better and better. I don't know exactly what your difficulty is. Can you be more specific about what the difficulty is that you're facing, and then maybe we can refine from there. But I need to understand more about the actual difficulty that you're facing. Let's see. If you're joining us live and you haven't said hello, and if you have a question, then please pop it in the chat. I'm just looking here through my mounds and mountains of email to see if there's anything that we can cover. It's always fun to go through the mailbag, and I appreciate all the emails that I receive. YX Bob says, will you delete this stream? I'm not sure yet, actually. So if you want to stick around, probably not, to tell you the truth, but you never know. You never know. I do maybe I don't know if anyone's calculated a percentage of live streams that have disappeared. But when they're generally active and lots of people have participated, the answer is no. This has been quite a good one. So if you have any questions, let me know. And wow, there's so much email. Unbelievable. Okay, so Pramesh says, thanks. I will practice more and then update. Excellent. Look forward to that update. Look forward to seeing you on the next chat if we can. And wow, so many great emails here. Okay, my current struggle, this is from Brandon, is not remembering formulas and ideas. My research and your training seem to indicate that this can be covered in the memory palace. The struggle is in remembering images, paintings, brief movie clips, architecture, and rooms. Does the memory palace cover this so that it will be easier to remember because our minds think in pictures? Maybe just simply more reflecting on the images I've seen at the end of the day would be helpful to start. That's a great brain exercise, actually, is to go through the day and think about the things that you've seen, what they are, and put them into either memory palaces, or if you put them into memory palaces during the day, revisit them, or just generally revisit your day. We know this from the science that journaling is a great way not only of preserving your memory and your brain health, but it's also a way of perceiving time better, having a better relationship to time, and what that essentially means is having a better relationship to your own memory. Journaling doesn't have to take that long. I journal every day, twice a day, and it really doesn't take that long. It's very, very edifying. It's you can feel the brain benefits from it over time, and you'll notice it very shortly after you start. But making an inventory of the things that you saw during the day, and just, I mean, Gary Small teaches the four features exercise, where you see people and you actively notice 4 different things. It's a passive memory exercise, so you don't use memory techniques as such, but you just notice 4 things about them. And then later in the day, you have an alarm or whatever. You have an index card somewhere on the fridge that says recall 4 things. And you just think, oh yeah, that woman had a red scarf and a black jacket and green pants and red shoes, whatever it was, right? Or it can be the ring that they had, or the color of their glasses. This is a powerful brain exercise. It's a powerful way of exercising your memory, and it's documented. It's not fantasy stuff. Like, this is from medical professionals who have worked with people who have either dementia or Alzheimer's or brain trauma, and it's helped them recover. Same thing with the satanama that I talked about earlier and have been talking about a lot. I don't go and do weird things like this just because they sound cool. I do it because there's research behind it, and I want to benefit from it and see for myself. And it's a great way of actually doing that and really focusing and concentrating on the images of the day. So Brandon's instincts here to do this will help you. But in terms of the hard, reliable memorization of things, memory palaces work. Memory palaces work incredibly well, and they work well for images. I mean, we know that it works well for abstract images too, because it's one of the arts of the memory competitions. So abstract images is a category amongst the others. So we know we can do it, and I know that it can be done. I have a course where I wanted to figure out how to memorize how people look at the same time as memorizing their names, and so we put that on there. And we figured it out, and it's there. So it's part of the training. You can remember images. So Brandon, I hope that you will do that. There is a post on magneticmemorymethod.com about using movies to improve your memory. There's a couple references to it. It's a really powerful exercise. YX Bob says, what does satanama mean? Well, there are some meanings to satanama. I never memorized them because I just don't care, because that's part of the spiritual tradition of this. But in the Kirtan Kriya, I wanted to memorize what the term Kirtan Kriya means. In any case, it can be interesting, but Kirtan means song, and Kriya means to do or action. And then Sa is somehow related to birth, and Ta is related to life, Na is to death or change, and Ma is rebirth. To me, that's just totally uninteresting. It doesn't really give you the scientific benefits, but it may be interesting to you, so go ahead and memorize that. I think that when we associate those kinds of things to scientific practices, we demean them and diminish them, but maybe not. It depends on who you are. I'm really, really interested in meditation, the history of, for example, Advaita Vedanta, which is how I stumbled across this in the first place. And it's really, really powerful. But I think it's a deviation from concentration to be thinking birth, life, death, rebirth, da da da. No, it can just be 1, 2, 3, 4. It can be Z Y X W V U T S R Q B O N M L K J I H G F E, or would it be, yeah, E D C B A, like that. You can do anything you want. It's irrelevant. And I know it's irrelevant because in the studies they talk about how irrelevant it is, what you say there. So Satanama means nothing. In fact, when I first heard it, the teacher didn't explain it in the training, and I thought it was maybe the notes of Hindu music, perhaps. In any case, not to diminish any people who are interested in the meaning of that, but it's probably a deviation from the benefits that you get, so I focus on that. And that said, though, there was an interesting conversation that took place on magneticmarymethod.com in one of the blog posts, where someone was talking about learning Sanskrit and how that the shapes of the words, so to speak, the actual plosives in the mouth and so forth, have a closer relationship to reality than perhaps some other things. I don't know if that's true or not. It's certainly interesting to explore. People have argued that the major method, like the designation T or T for 1, and 2 for N, and 3 for M, and so forth, that those come from benefits from the shapes of the mouth and so forth. So maybe not. It's all of these things are fantastical and perhaps wonderful, but we, or at least I, and I hope that you, are focused on the number one thing that matters. Can we remember the information that makes our life better? Language learning, formulas, so we don't have to spend all this time looking them up, and numbers so that we're safe and secure in case we lose a card or get trapped somewhere and we need to call a loved one. You know, like the things that matter, the things that make life better immediately. So that's why I personally didn't remember all that stuff or memorize all that stuff. What I did want to remember, though, memorize, is that the exercise is called Kirtan Kriya. And so I hung it on the curtain. That was the memory palace, and did a bunch of other stuff to remember the others. It may be useful, though, actually, to get my head out of my butt and actually memorize what that does mean, the actual term of the exercise, because that is kind of useful. Rachid says, hey, I've looked out if you have any courses, and it turned out you have a lot in there in your recommendation. I don't recommend anything on that site. I recommend the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. So those are there. I'm not sure for how much longer, but they're there, and I don't necessarily recommend it. And the reason why is that they take too many liberties in controlling the teaching experience. So a book is better than one of those, frankly, because they're just making changes randomly to the platform. They make it difficult in terms of actually helping the people there, and it's overall maybe things will change and improve, but overall it's not a very pleasant experience. But on the masterclass, then we can really make sure everything is proper. Pedro says, one of the problems that I find difficult to remember and I cannot analyze information either. It's very difficult for me to understand what I read. I have read more than anything what it is to be able to understand what reading says. So in terms of working on comprehension, one of the things to do is to learn about pre-reading so that you see context. Pre-reading is reading the back of the book, it's reading the conclusion to make sure that you know where the author's leading you, reading through the index. I almost religiously look through all of the listings and indexes of books because it's so powerful. It's so powerful for priming the mind of what's to come. And then you can read in advance, like you are looking through the index and you think, oh wow, he mentions Frank Zappa, or he mentions Christopher Hitchens, or he mentions whoever he mentions. And then you can go to that part of the book and read that part. Then you get more excited, you get more interested, you start to see the context more. Then you read the table of contents, read the introduction. Maybe you read right to a chapter that's the most interesting to you. There's no reason to read books in order, necessarily. I mean, novels are a different thing, but even then, right? Roland Barthes has a great book called SZ that totally destroys the idea of reading books in order. But pre-reading will help with comprehension. It should, anyway. And it can be a bit unusual, but once you get into the practice, you almost will never go back. It's that powerful in terms of understanding a book. All of these features that I mentioned, Gerard Genet called them paratexts. I highly recommend finding a book called Paratexts by Gerard Genet and reading it. It's a bit dated, of course, but if you stretch your imagination, you can see how it applies to video games and to DVD covers and movie posters even. It's a really great book. I love it. And it will help you understand more about how to pre-read, what to pre-read, why to pre-read it. It's not about speed reading, it's not about slow reading, it's not about really anything. It's just about understanding the construction of information. It has a history. There's a history to how information came to be packaged in the ways that it is packaged. And the more that you understand that, the better you will be, the better off you will be. So that's that. If you're joining us live and you haven't said hello, let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Hit that thumbs up and do a little bit more mailbag here. Rachid says, do you have any book recommendations on memory palaces and memory techniques? Well, yeah, I mean, I've written quite a few, so I'd recommend my own. I'd recommend The Memory Code by Lynn Kelly. I recommend The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci by, hi Andy, I will answer your question just in a second here. The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci, it's not going to teach you much about creating memory palaces, but I do recommend it. I recommend The Memory Book by Tony Buzan. I recommend, well, there's so many to choose from. Basically, I mean, Moonwalking with Einstein, but a lot of people complain that Moonwalking with Einstein didn't teach them much, so maybe read that after you have some dedicated things. But to tell you the truth, like Harry Lorraine doesn't talk about memory palaces, and that's one of the main impetuses for why I wrote what I wrote, because he wasn't into that. And to me, it was then so obviously the most powerful tool, and it still is obviously the most powerful tool. And someone named Louis Smile has a book on the memory palace, but you know, a lot of it's just superficial. Kevin Horsley's book is amazing. There's just tons. Andy, so good to see you. It's been a long time. Thanks for saying hello. We've talked about a lot. It's been kind of a jazz session with the Q&A. YouTube now apparently lets you see the chat afterwards in the replay, so that should enable to actually be able to go through to the interesting parts if questions mean something to you. But the reasons for, just to review, the reasons for taking a break really involved, you know, if you're not feeling well, then that's a good time to take a break. It's also just a good time to take a break, period, so that you can analyze and examine your practice, look for places to improve. Another reason was if you're actually just not practicing the memory techniques, so that you get it off your mind, because that leads to the Zeigarnik effect. And also, we talked about not taking a break when you need to stop and you need to study more. You need to study and implement and practice. Really, really important, because some people will be practicing and not getting any results, and it's because they either haven't understood the techniques or they need to actually study in the first place, because they haven't studied them at all. They just saw a post or a video and said, oh, that sounds good, and they had very superficial training. So those are the major reasons. And then it's just good to take a break from anything. So I'm on a break from the gym now. I went back on Saturday, just did a little bit of light training. I only took a break because I had the flu and I didn't want to infect anybody else. And a friend of mine said, take at least 7 days off the gym. I didn't make it through all 7, but in any case, just go get lightly back into it. Same thing, if you get lightly back into memory training, a couple cards, maybe some vocabulary, whatever. Don't race into massive amounts. Um, let's see here. Vasudeva says, my challenges around memory include names of people and their designation. While I do put in efforts to try and remember names, I am not able to recollect the same at the right moment. This subsequently leads to loss of confidence while speaking to anyone. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And the answer is almost always study, implement, and practice. I did an interview recently, and it was really great. It's the first time it's ever happened. I was on an interview. Someone threw some names at me to memorize while we were talking. I had to do it real time. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. And uh, it's exactly that sort of thing. Like, there is no right moment for memory techniques. There's never any right moment. And one of the best things that you can do is put yourself in situations where it's not the right moment, and feel the burn in your cheeks sometimes if you make a mistake, just to get acquainted to it so that it doesn't bother you. You learn for it to not be bothersome. Because it doesn't need to be bothersome, right? Now, in this case, I didn't make a mistake, but there was a near mistake. And it's just a great experience, And now I know more about my own practice because of that mistake. And well, we'll get into it. I'll send out an email and post on media and so forth when it comes out, so you can listen to it. But I'm really excited for it because it was a fun interview, fun to be put on the spot like that and talk about the classic mistakes that people make with names. And basically, what I would say to you is that you just got to practice and put yourself in low stress situations to practice. So, if you're at a restaurant, people have the name tags. You don't have to say to them what their name is. You don't have to use their name to test yourself and to confirm. So you can memorize their names, maybe write it down in your device or on a piece of paper, and then test yourself and just mentally check. There's no stress. It's just for you. It's just a game in your head. So I hope that will help you. But that loss of confidence sucks. So I really feel for you on there, and just work on it. Work on it. Don't let things get you down. It's not useful. Now, the brain will naturally tend to do this. For whatever reason, it wants to punish. It wants to make things dramatic and a big deal, but it's not a big deal if you make a mistake with memory techniques. Most people aren't even going to remember that it happened. And it's just an opportunity for you to zero in on your own practice and think, what could I do better? What could I do better? And in the case of this interview, and I've seen Ron White do this. I've seen lots of people who really are not names on the. I've seen Harry Lorraine do it on video. They'll be recalling the names in a room and they'll say, I will come back to you. And I've seen memory competitors, I've seen Alex Mullen reassembling a deck of cards and coming back to certain things. And we will go back and get it later. And that's what happened. There was a name, Mary, and I said, I'll come back to that. And then I went through the rest of the names, 100% accurate. Then I came back to that name and I started to describe what went wrong to say. And then nothing went wrong, but I would have gotten it. And then he said, oh, it's because of the religious thing, isn't it? Because he knows me personally also, and a little bit of my I'm not an atheist or anything like that, but I'm quite critical of anything that isn't scientific, right? And that instantly triggered what it was. So he kind of like gave me a hint, but I would have gotten it, but I didn't get the opportunity to get it. But anyway, because I was like, oh, Mary, of course. But the mistake is, and he might be right actually. We all have these unconscious issues in our life that could get into our practice. But the point is I didn't lose confidence as a result of it. I just saw it as an interesting thing, and just thought, oh, thank heavens that didn't make an actual mistake, because that'd be embarrassing. But even if I had, big deal. It just makes you human, right? Because you are. and it's just great. So put yourself in as many situations as you can, Vasudeva, and don't let it beat you down. You'll build confidence faster by understanding why the mistakes are happening in real life, in real time, than you will by running away from it or getting beat down. So I hope that helps. Linda's here. Hello, Linda. Oh, I love all your Emojis always. Yes, we had a nice Easter. Thank you for your Easter wishes. Did you have a nice Easter as well? I hope so. Let me know what you did. Did you do any memory practice? Alex says, how do you get rid of brain fog? Great question. And hi, Swarup, I see you there. Thanks for saying hello and your question. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and what questions you have for memory. So Alex, the way that I know of to get rid of brain fog is to think a lot about your diet, about your sleep, about how hydrated you are, get rid of alcohol, get rid of nicotine, get rid of any addictions whatsoever, and do memory practice, do brain practice. Do what it takes to really be the master of your mind. You can, only you can, actually, nobody else can do it for you. Have regular brain practice. But probably most of the brain fog is coming from food and lack of sleep. Stress. I have an episode of the podcast coming out about stress pretty soon here. And that's a big one. Stress can impact your memory. Ways to get rid of stress: exercise, meditation, and so on. These are all, I know, that advice again. Isn't there anything else? No. We humans are pretty simple. We're not only really, really simple, but optimizing our lives is also quite simple. And you know, it can be also that some people need to find different jobs. They're trapping themselves in jobs they hate, and they need to get out of it. Reebok9, thanks for your question. So glad you're here. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Swarup had one about how to implement the technique. Well, first of all, make sure that you've taken the free course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Make sure you've taken it seriously. It will show you how to implement it. And it's just that simple. Make memory palaces. Make lots of them. Make sure you understand your memory. Make sure you're using magnetic imagery. Make sure you understand association at its core, and that you know how to use it. And then make sure you're using recall rehearsal so that the information is actually getting into long-term memory. And then, of course, teach others. A lot of people, they ignore this step, but one of the best ways to know that you know this is to teach others. Share it. Pass it on. Reebok9, awesome work, you say. Thanks for everything. How much time do you recommend to study daily? What can we do if we feel tired? Okay, well, one of the things you can do if you feel tired is sleep better. Get to bed earlier. Don't have devices in your bedroom with you. I've read research that says that having light in your eyes from a device is equivalent to a shot of espresso. So don't do that. Remove light from your room. And look at your diet. Make sure you're well hydrated. Make sure that you're not drinking too much coffee, because you can get a nice boost of energy from a certain amount of coffee, but if you overdo it, it can be retrogressive and take away your energy. How much time do I recommend to study daily? Well, it depends where you are in your journey. So if you're just started with memory techniques, you may want to just binge and learn everything, right? Which is what a lot of people do. But I would say make sure that you take a course from beginning to end. Here's the tip on how to take a course from beginning to end. Start at the beginning, get a memory journal, make notes on everything, and then go to the end. And then maybe review it again if you need to. Review your notes and implement. It's the magic way. It's not the magic way, it's just the way. It's nothing magic about it, but many people struggle to do that. Not most people, but many people do. But that's how you do it. And so when you get to practice levels, I know, for example, Alex Mullen has talked about how he practiced rarely more than 15 minutes a day to win the World Memory Championships 3 times. I tend to do about 15 minutes practice as well. I spend maybe 15 to 30 minutes on language learning every day, and I use memory techniques almost solely for the actual absorption and retention and then initial recall of the words. But then I want to stop using the memory techniques because it's now into RAM, so to speak, random access memory. So yeah, I don't like to spend a whole lot of time. I've rarely spent more than 15 to 30 minutes. I bring my language learning and memory practice together. So it's the brain exercise, memory practice, language learning, whammy, all together, and it feels really good, and it's powerful. And journaling can be part of that as well. But I obviously spend more time in the language than that on a daily basis because I speak a lot with my wife. My wife and I, we maybe an hour about 50-50, 50% Chinese, 50% English. Um, and well, maybe not 50% of either of them because there's also the language of love, right? So in any case, but yeah, that's been really exciting. Having a lot of fun. Uh, I know that not all people have a spouse, but yeah, it's that simple. It's not complicated. People make things too complicated. Linda says, "Yeah, buddy, happy days, great." Jaideep, reading books. Okay. Good to see you, Jaideep. I know you mentioned speed reading earlier, but I think I hope that I have made it clear that I want you to go and get speed reading training from Jonathan Levy. So go to magneticmemorymethod.com/SL because I don't do speed reading. I advocate his training on it, but I think if speed reading doesn't work for you, come back to reading and read more strategically. The shortcuts are found along the way. Technical terms recollection. We're back at Vasudeva's email here. He says, I work in IT and manage the pre-sales team. This requires me to study a lot of technical material, and while I spend a lot of time in reading, I have issues comprehending the same and hence challenges in explaining it to someone. Well, memory techniques will help with that. There's a section in the masterclass that has information on memorizing IT that will help you. And it's just a matter of studying and implementing and practicing. Just sip at it. SIP. That's not a mistake that I made that, Sip at it. One sip at a time. Study, implement, and practice. Then Vasudeva continues, connecting the dots. I'm not sure if this is around memory, but it's a challenge that haunts me. It's disheartening when people around you are able to connect the dots and you don't see the relation. Well, Vasudeva, that is disheartening if you let it dishearten you. Here's the thing though. A lot of people speak in shorthand. They have code. Sometimes they're friends with each other for many, many years, but you haven't been in their friendship circle. Sometimes they know TV programs that you don't know. I know this from having been married twice and having had friends from around the world. I mean, it might be astonishing to you, or it was astonishing to me that my wife had never seen RoboCop. So, to be able to say, I'd buy that for $1 and it mean nothing to her, whereas with my brother or many of my friends from my generation, we can just make that absurd joke and it has tons of meaning for us. It means nothing to her. Yeah. And, I talk about the Matrix a lot. Many people, they have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, right? And I hear things all the time that I can't connect the dots. And I'm also, like, I often don't understand jokes. I don't get the joke a lot of time. And people say, I'm just making a joke. And I'll be like, yeah, well, why is that funny? Like, but just don't let it bother you. I don't, if you're not connecting the dots, then just say, I'm sorry, no, I don't see the connection there. I don't see the connection there. There's nothing wrong in that. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just part of life, part of human communication. And then if it's worth memorizing, well, then you'll have some tools to do it. And that's the beauty of life, is when information is worth memorizing, then you'll have the tools on hand. And if you don't get it, you don't penetrate it, great question, but don't worry when you don't connect the dots. It's no problem. Take a break from trying to connect the dots, or give yourself more time on it and see if you do over time. But usually, and it's getting more and more this way on the internet, like, I like to watch PewDiePie, but I don't understand half the memes that he is always doing in his meme reviews, because I'm not even in meme world. So whatever, can try to connect the dots, and I'm trying to keep up a little bit with all the hip kids these days and their terminology and what they're doing and what they're thinking, but it's a whole new language. There's a lot of hieroglyphics and so forth. You don't have to understand everything. So Linda has lots more. Needs some tea. Yeah, tea is good. Green tea is good for memory. YX Bob, what's your oldest memory palace information and how long has it been? Good, let's try this. Filled with mingled cream and amber, I will raise this glass again. Such hilarious visions clamber through the chambers of my brain. Quaintest thoughts and queerest fancies come to life and fade away. What care I how time passes? I am drinking ale today. I love that. That is in my first Memory Palace. And I'm pretty sure I got that right. I'm pretty sure I did. So that's it. That's my oldest. That's Edgar Allan Poe, by the way. I used to change it, though. I used to say, what care I how time passes, I am drinking beer today. Because I wasn't an ale drinker, I was a beer drinker. But in the original, it's ale. Filled with mingled cream and amber, I will raise this glass again. Such hilarious visions clamber through the chambers of my brain. Quaintest thoughts and queerest fancies come to life and fade away. What care I how time passes, I am drinking ale today. Yeah, that's it. It's got to be it. So that's it. I hope that answers your question. YX Bob, great one, actually. Really great. Joe Moni, how can I apply memory palaces on my UNV lessons? Please let me know what UNV lessons are. I don't know what that is. YX Bob said, oh yeah, we got that. Yeah, incidentally, when people used to visit me in Berlin, I would often take them to that memory palace. Pratik says, I joined just now. Why is the video title this? Well, Pratik, we talked about reasons why you might want to take a break. And it is surely useful for people. So please go back and watch the replay if you're interested in some of the reasons why that you might want to take a break. Denise writes, the most frustrating thing is that there's so much to remember and you can't recall it. Well, yeah, that can be frustrating. I would say train your memory. It's really, really important to do that. Instead of accepting it, do something about it, because frustration doesn't go away. Often we just manage it too much instead of doing something about it. And I highly recommend that you do something about it. So this is from Jacob. I have done a memory palace. I'm currently pressured for exams. However, I will make an effort to accomplish using memory techniques, and I'm wondering what's the best method to memorize dance and martial arts moves. Okay, that's covered in the master class. Abby says, the most frustrating thing about my memory is I want to remember more for conversations at work. I especially need to know a lot of numbers when I need to know more just offhand. Also retention in reading and just chatting with people. So numbers is easily covered by the major method. If you don't know the major method, you can go to magneticmemorymethod.com/major-method, learn it up, start using it. I recommend doing a 00 to 99. This month in the mastermind of the masterclass is a training on 00 to 99 that's very powerful. So that'll help you if you're in the mastermind. YX Bob says, cool, how long has it been? Wow, that would have been a long time ago. The exact year would I'd have to do a life grid exercise, but I would guess we're talking about 2004-ish or so. So yeah, it was something like that, and a really, really great memory palace. No, I think it'd be 2003. Basically, when I got into this was when I was in my PhD, and so I started my PhD in 2003, and then that winter, yeah. So it's like the 2003-2004 mark. When in the Canadian school system, you always start in September and then you end in April. So years are always divided in my memory. So yeah, it would be around then, that winter. So I guess that would be 2004. I don't know. I can actually look it up because the weather charts are there, and I remember how that winter was. Man, I don't miss Toronto winter at all. I don't miss it at all. Okay, so Abby had a thing about numbers, and the major method is for that. Retention and reading we've covered today a fair amount. And just chatting with people. Yeah, one of the things when you're chatting with people is, I would just say, just be relaxed, be calm. Oh, Chris is here, Natural Flow. Hello, thanks for saying hello. Good to see you. It's been a while. Late working, yeah. Well, I try to do once in a while an evening session for the Europe people, and I assume this is a good time for Europe, as opposed to the morning sessions that are my preference because I'm at my best. But it seems to be okay today. I don't like to show up when it's at the end of the day and I'm tired, but having a lot of fun. We're having a great session, actually. I really enjoyed everything today. Some good questions. Some solid participation. Awesome. Hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. Let me know where you are in the world. If you're joining us now, if you have questions, love to answer them. And good to see you, Chris. It's been a while. YX Bob says, do you currently use that palace for new information now? No, I don't. I have reused it in the past for different things. I don't like to reuse memory palaces if I don't have to, although there are some that are used over and over and over again. So the one that I use for my card practice is used over and over and over again. I will use this apartment a fair amount over and over and over again, but generally it's not my preference. So there's lots of reasons for that. Yeah, Chris, hello, ni hao ma. I had the flu, and so I saw a person I watched YouTube lives, and he was doing YouTube lives anyway when he had the flu, and I just didn't want to demonstrate working while you're sick. I don't think that's a good positive message to be putting out there, just so you can stay on top of the YouTube metrics and not lose all your channel and all this slavery stuff that they put on top of us YouTubers. Assuming I'm a YouTuber, I don't know if I am. I guess one of these days I'll get one of those things if I get enough subscribers, which, you guys can all help with that if you like by sharing these videos and being active in the discussions. I won't deny that I have a little spot inside of me that wouldn't mind one of those YouTube play buttons. I'd hang it right here, or maybe right here. But these things too shall pass. But in any case, that's where I've been. Just here in Brisbane, resting, getting over the flu. I never get sick, so it was actually kind of neat. It was kind of neat to remember what it's like to get sick. Anyway, back to Abby's question here about chatting with people. There's a thing, I think we've talked about it before, the ugly sister effect, which is, Cinderella, the Prince Charming comes to get Cinderella, and he really wants Cinderella, but all the ugly sisters keep coming in her place. That happens in our brain too. We want to remember something, and everything except for the information comes. The answer is just to relax and say, it'll come to me. This happens to memory athletes and memory experts and mnemonists as much as it does to anybody else. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm just going to flag that, it'll come back to me. And by letting it go, it'll come back to you. Now, if you want to be really knowledgeable in your chatting with people, as Abby puts it, then you want to think about, why? Is it because you want to stroke your ego or have your ego stroked? Is it because you want to help people better by being able to remember book titles and so forth, and you have a virtuous reason for that? That makes a difference, right? So I would think about that as well, because one of the reasons why I like to memorize the titles of books, like The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bithell, is so I can recommend it to you, and I don't have to be like, oh, what was that book? So, and I also just read Do No Harm by Henry Marsh, and it's nice to be able to remember those things, so I can just say, oh, I read this great book, and you should read it because, and then they'll be like, yeah, what was the book? And they'll be I don't know, I'll get back to you. And then, of course, you never do, right? It's much better to be able to say, oh, let me write that down for you, or here, give me your app or your device, and I'll find it for you on Amazon or whatever. It's much better. Does it happen every single time? No, but it does happen sufficiently enough due to this. But it's not about showing off or it's personal enjoyment of a good memory, but it's also being able to legitimately help people better by giving them recommendations. And this goes back to an email that we just went through where it's like being a team manager and needing to talk to people and knowing products in products in a product catalog and so forth. These techniques are great for that. Great for that. So that's the reason to do it. So if you want to chat with people, first of all, think about why, and then design a memory practice that enables you to fulfill that outcome. It's that simple. Barath says, how do you find structure in academic papers? I saw a few videos on YouTube, couldn't get around it, to make an MP out of it. MP is Mind Memory Palace. Structure in an academic paper. Well, there are many kinds of academic papers. So you might want to think about, is there one structure or are there many structures? What kinds of academic papers? Literary theory is going to be structured different than anything else. Like chemistry papers will be different than biology papers, perhaps slightly. Depends on the purpose of the paper. Maybe structure isn't the answer. Maybe you just need to read papers from beginning to end, highlight the points that seem important to you, and then mind map those or use those in a memory palace. I like to just be open and flexible to reading things on their own terms, rather than trying to find some special structure that fits all reading. It's just not the case. There are many books that you have to warm up to, many articles you have to warm up to. Authors have different styles. Genres have different styles. So don't expect them all to be the same. Learn how to be adaptable, have multiple strategies. I don't think there is a hidden structure. Now, when it comes to memorizing material from books, then there is, and that is covered in the masterclass, in a part of the masterclass called the master plan, and I talk about how that I use index cards primarily for academic material, and the index cards are indexed to a memory palace, and they have there's different strategies you can use with bridging figures and using a 00 to 99 inside of the memory palace and so on. I highly recommend going and getting that training so that you know how, but do not have the fantasy. I would recommend not having a fantasy that there's going to be a structure in academic writing that you can perceive and then follow. But that said, generally there is the thesis that's presented in the first part. Ideally, they'll have an introduction that will talk you through the order in which they're going to validate the thesis, and then there'll be a conclusion that wraps it all up. Now, unfortunately, not all academics write that way. The German academic writers, maybe Chris can tell me if I'm off on this, but they tend to be a little bit more sensitive to consistency in that area in their academic writing. Very Hegelian to this day. Not always. It's hard to generalize. Things are changing. Things are changing and have changed and will continue to change. So, yeah, try to be flexible to reading and develop mnemonic style, so that you're able to really show up to your best possible self, no matter what shows up on the page. All right. So, Chris says, most often my professors were sort of thrusting upon us a certain form and style. In terms of your reading or what you had to write? I mean, I don't know. It's all a case-by-case basis. I know that my Dr. Fotter, he was very critical of the kinds of reading that was thrown at academics, and in the interdisciplinary program I was in, there was a lot more freedom in how that you create works. But I think that at the end of the day, how that we write in an academic setting, probably we benefit more from structure. It's just simply because, at least I can only reflect on my own experience, but I was just young and didn't understand the value of constraint and rules and so forth. I knew about them, but didn't really resisted them and so forth. So if you think about, well, I mean, there's different ways of thinking about it. It depends on your academic program and so forth. But a lot of the purpose of a PhD dissertation in many programs is that it's not your time to show off your ideas. It's really about you demonstrating your knowledge of the field and then showing how that your idea either supplements it or causes some sort of change. And then in order to effectively demonstrate your knowledge of all those other ideas, obviously doing it in a way that is systematic and structured makes a lot of sense. And so I actually had to rewrite my dissertation because I didn't do it the first time around, and it would have saved a lot of time to do it the structured way first. Now that said, I still managed to graduate the first of my class, so it didn't slow me down that much. R803 is here. Hello, R803. Great to see you. Thanks for saying hello. Let me know if you have any last questions. Going to wrap up here pretty quick. But it's been a great pleasure and delight, and I appreciate everybody being here. Maybe we've got one more mailbag here. Post any last questions that you might have before I get off the horn. Natural Flow says, the other time you said, remember actions and cards that are out in a card game. Yeah, well, we were going to have a chat about that maybe. Oh, you're working on this at the moment, brainstorming. Great. That's awesome. Oh, you're welcome, Brath. I really appreciate that question. I hope that it helps you. I know it's not the straightforward, easy answer, but there's no. I often think of that thing. Don't try to make it easier. Be better. You know. Stop trying to make things easier. Try to just make yourself better. That's usually the best thing, and that is what makes it easier, right? Is just get better. So Richa says, I'm an engineering student and have to go through remembering lots and lots of weird answers in weird languages. Woo, weird. How to apply the same trick to remember answers? Well, it's not really a trick. It's a strategy. It's a skill. It's a talent. It's something anyone can involve. And let's see here. There's an example here. Wow, that's definitely masterclass material. So we'll go through that there. Let's see. R803 says, I'm currently trying to implement memory techniques for learning my fourth language, Italian. Awesome. Cool. Italian's fun. Let me know if you have specific questions about that. And if you haven't seen the book that I have there, that would be great. Thanks to everybody who answered my question about Sydney in August. Thinking of doing a little memory training event there. If you haven't received that email, why not? Why are you not on my email list? If you're in the Australia area, you might want to join us there. That would be great. So that's that. And let's see what else we have here. Chris says, good to see you well and healthy with your usual sunshine demeanor. Yep. Hier kommt die Sonne. YX Bob says, do you think your next stream will be in the next weeks or months? Yes, I do, but I can't say exactly when. Linda says, top of the class, bro. Thank you for your info skills. Hello to the family. R803 asks, which book, Dr. Well, it's called How to Learn and Memorize Italian Vocabulary. And that one hasn't been in the second edition yet, so damaging admission, it's not the best of the series. So I'd recommend like the second edition of German, French, or Italian. I know you're not learning, German, French, or Spanish. I know you're not learning those languages, but the second editions are better. We will eventually be doing the second edition of the Italian to make sure that it's up to the standard that the second edition's got to, but the first edition should do just fine. I mean, I think that it just comes back to study, implement, and practice. I don't really understand why that the training, those books are sometimes polarizing to people. I really don't get it. Why that some people are able to uh, go take the training and in 6 weeks memorize 1,000 words in a language, or 210 days, or 2,000 characters in a month, or whatever the different things that come through, and others they just can't. I think part of it has to do with that they maybe don't read the books from beginning to end, or they don't follow up the actual training recommendations, and so forth. But I don't take it personally. But I do take it scientifically, and I'd like to figure out what it is, so that third editions can maybe fix problems that are in the second edition to reach more people. But then the problem is there, right? Is that whatever is working, by then trying to accommodate what isn't working for, say, the population that it isn't working for, what happens if you then alienate the people for whom it's working? It's a real challenge. I think there's 4 learning types at least. There's the people who need to know what something is as soon as possible. Then there are the people who need to know why something is important as soon as possible. And then there are the people who need to know how something works as soon as possible. And then there's the people who just want the action steps as soon as possible. And the question is, the challenge is, how do you balance any training material so that it balances those things without boring 75% of the population while you're focusing on the 25th? Do you make 4 different books, or do you bring it together? I think in the memory connection, I got it right for the first time. And we'll see. That's certainly what's going forward in all the improvements, is really focusing on an understanding of these learning styles. I know so much more now also. But one of the best things that I can do for you is, instead of trying to accommodate all those different learning styles, is just teach you what they are, right? And then give you some way of figuring out where you fit in there, and just develop a little bit of patience if you're not getting your need right up front, because it's impossible. And then when you're, like when I learned this stuff, I suddenly was able to read a lot more widely, and exercise patience through a lot more training, because I was like, okay, so that's why I get annoyed with this teacher. And then you're more forgiving, and you give things their due more. Now, I would say I was always pretty good at that, because I just love knowledge. I don't care if you're boring for 20 minutes before you get to the point, because I love knowledge, and I can see other indicators, right? Like other people are into this, and there's this, that, and the other thing. I try not to pay attention to reviews, because reviews are a sickness and a poison and a blight on so many things. Because, okay, it's good overall, more or less. I'd say it's good that technology, the internet, has opened it up for everybody to have their opinion and so forth. But it's also really bad because of the 4 learning types, at least 4 learning types. Because there are a lot of people who are diminishing and destroying the reputations of very, very good trainings that I know for a fact to be very, very good. But they can't see it. It's not their fault, but they just can't see it. And yet we've opened up this democratic ability to essentially put graffiti all over the internet, when they're just simply not qualified to actually comment on that kind of material created for a kind of learning style. And that is created in that kind of learning style because that creator has that learning style themselves, or they have that communication style. It's their preference, so they're going to create the training in that way. So my best suggestion so far, and it seems to be working in the memory connection very, very well, it's just to create training around that, help people understand that. And then inside of that, you have a learning hierarchy, which is your consumption preferences. And the more you understand about that, it's never about having any weakness. It's about strengthening the things that are already strong, and then balancing out the areas that you're neglecting. And doing it in an understanding where you develop patience for things that aren't necessarily your preferred consumption style. If you can get that, you will then become a much stronger learner and just a generally better human being. And so more on that soon. It's one of my biggest passions right now. To be honest, there's a fair amount of speculation based on observation of learners on my part. I don't even know if you need a bunch of scientific research. I haven't read a whole bunch of De Bono, but I bet you if I go and read De Bono, it's probably like all there already. Who can say? Maybe not. This is my joy in life, is figuring this stuff out, learning better myself, and sharing with you what I've discovered about it. But none of that is going to be some hack or magic trick or shortcut. It's going to be you working on yourself, figuring out what kind of learner you are, and then adjusting and absorbing information differently, considering it differently. And that's what's the most exciting thing of all, really, is finding these things out, pivoting, changing, trying new things, being responsive to yourself and to how you connect with the world, because who else can do it? No one but you can do it. It's really, really that simple. And so I hope to continue this conversation with you about these things. And I hope to hear from you if you enjoyed it and that you liked it and you found it useful. And I hope that you'll be on the next live session, even though I can't say when exactly it will be. It's much less likely for them to be at this time of day, more often around 9 a.m. in Australian time, just due to my own daily planning and rituals and preferences of being a productive person. But I do enjoy them very much, and I think they well, it's a great thing, I think, to be with you. Rachid says, I really enjoyed this talk. Thank you. Natural flow. Very, very good to see you all. Linda says, gas. Fire. Water. Clouds. Steam. Thank you, everybody. It was a lot of fun. If you are watching this and you haven't taken the free course, it's the best way I can help you get started at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Just remember to sip at it, study, implement, and practice, one sip at a time. And DOC. As Linda says here, knowledge is power. Doing is the origin of confidence with these techniques. It's the origin of creativity. All the creativity that you would ever need from the techniques is in the doing of the techniques. It's the origin of courage. It's the origin of confidence. It's the origin of competence. And I think most importantly, it's the origin of consistency. Doing is the origin of consistency. This is the pain that most people seem to have, is that they're not consistent in the practices that lead to the skills that they want. We've talked a lot on these lives about how to do that, and we will talk about it again. And until then, come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. Let me know here on the YouTube channel. Watch the last video on brain exercises. Be active in the comments, like buttons, share these posts around, and one of these days, we'll get one of those goofy things there. We'll love it. Oh no, I said it was goofy. Maybe I jinxed it. Oh well, who cares? Meditate and do your best to study, implement, and practice, and we'll see you real soon. And until we do, keep yourself magnetic. Good night.